So I'm going to let her continue to do that, and I will begin. Thank you very much for those of you that have taken the time to join us this evening. Myself and Mrs. Blackwell had a very brief discussion just moments ago saying we're very glad that we decided to do this over Teams rather than in person, as the weather has not been very kind to us, particularly just as we were about to start. So thank you for taking the time, and hopefully the webinar this evening will be useful to you. And as I said, you will be able to ask some questions if needed at the end. So my role as assistant head for Key Stage 3 means that essentially I oversee all the aspects of Key Stage 3, the wider team, including heads of year, what those expectations are for both staff and for subject areas, and ways that you can support that process, as well as things like homework. And then, as I explained, Mrs. Shaw is our second in charge of English and the lead for literacy. So she's going to explain to you what we're doing in terms of reading and how we're making that a much bigger focus throughout the year. Please, as a reminder, do use the chat function, and we will address those at the end. And please do make sure that you're muted as we go through this evening's webinar. So, as you are probably aware, we have 3 very clear values, and we display these very proudly throughout the school, and we ask students to make sure that they're fulfilling them. So this is one of the boards that we have, and we've got them all over the school. This is one particularly in our observatory, which is very prominent. And we want that to be something that students are always working towards, both in their lessons, outside of their lessons, but also when they are walking around in their local communities in Red Hill, and making sure they're being aspirational, they're being innovative, and particularly they're being respectful. We want them to demonstrate those values at all times. It's the thread that runs through every aspect of our work, and we've worked really, really hard, particularly since we've become Carrington School, to make sure that that thread goes through our school priorities, our homeschool agreement, the way that we deliver our excellence programme, our rewards, and making it part of the common language that we use as a school. So hopefully they are words that you are familiar with as parents and carers. We certainly think that our students are familiar with those, and will continue to be as they obviously move through the school. So I just want to talk to you about the Key Stage 3 team, many of whom, if not all of whom, you will know very well. I am, as I've said, assistant head teacher. I'm also part of the safeguarding team. So I'm one of the deputy safeguarding leads, which means that I am always going to be very focused on the safety and the security of our students, and may well have had conversations with you, or might have conversations with you at some point in the future if need be. The team that I manage is a very comprehensive but also very competent team, made up of heads of year and in some cases an assistant head of year, and also student hub coordinators. They're the immediate team that I work with, and I've put them there into the groups. So at the top of the page, you've got the Year 7 team. Just below the picture of myself, you have the Year 8 team, and then below them, the Year 9 team. They work in what we call hubs, and those hubs we found to be very effective both through COVID and since, and they've become a very permanent and important feature of the work that we do at Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. Underneath that and supporting that work is your child's tutor, or tutors, which is very rare circumstances, and hopefully you will have had contact from the tutor, or will have contact with the tutor over the course of the next few weeks, because they are a really important role. It's the person that your child sees at the beginning of every day, and you know, is someone that hopefully they can become close to and have a good positive relationship with as needed. So all of those key people meet myself through line management with some of the heads of year. We meet in staff training time. We have a 3-weekly cycle in which we're discussing all of the aspects that we need to for the students, particularly around their pastoral needs, but also around other aspects. And within that team, they are liaising with heads of faculty and directors of learning to make sure that we're fulfilling the right things for the students in terms of behaviour, their welfare and their well-being, and obviously their learning needs are being addressed and supported. So hopefully you believe that that's the case, and you know, we will continue to work really hard as a team of people to make that the case. We do have a large number of students who have special educational needs, and if that applies to your child or to your children, then you should have had contact with Mrs. Maddox, or at least the child's tutor, in the first half term to make sure that we are putting the right things in place and understanding what those needs are. There's significant liaison that goes on between both heads of year and Mrs. Maddox. I myself line manage both the Key Stage 3 heads of year and Mrs. Maddox, so I have a really good understanding of what is the case for students with SEND across the school, and that fits into a model that we use within the school, which is known as DICE. So it's the developmental and inclusive centre of excellence, and that centre of excellence part and the inclusive part is particularly around how we support students with SEND. So there are a whole range of different things that we do and a whole range of different external services that we liaise with, and all of those are in place to make sure that we're supporting students both in their learning but particularly in other aspects as well. In terms of support and rewards, we have put a really big focus on support and rewards actually, particularly in the last year, and made a big deal out of rewards because we want it to be something that students can strive towards, and for there to be some value in getting credits and being rewarded. We've actually got celebration assemblies which are going to come up, and I myself will be leading the celebration assemblies for Key Stage 3 next week, so I'm very much looking forward to congratulating and ensuring that students recognise that all the hard work that they put in last half term is still the case, and they can continue to develop that as the academic year goes through. So we want to make sure that that is always a case throughout the year, and we will have points at which we will celebrate students, both as a key stage, as a whole year group, and obviously within their tutor groups as well. We want to provide students with opportunities to demonstrate their skills, and then make sure that they are fulfilling our values of aspire, innovate and respect. But also we have one of our awards which is around Ad Astra, so students can get up to, or in fact they can get 10 credits just for doing something exceptional. And that is what we want a Carrington student to be, someone that's always striving to be the best in those areas, but where possible to be exceptional in various aspects as well. And where that is the case, we will recognise and we will reward and make sure that they understand that their contribution and their work is valued. In terms of uniform, we would like all of our students, obviously if you're in year 7 or year 8 you already be in this uniform, but if you're in year 9, to make sure that you are working towards getting a full Carrington school uniform within this academic year in readiness for next September. We do put a lot of emphasis on uniform, and I'm sure that you will be very well aware of that. If there are any issues, please do contact the year teams, and make sure that the standard of uniform is strong, that trainers are not worn unless it's within PE, that no jewellery is obviously on show unnecessarily other than what's stated in our uniform policy. And all of that can be found on our website, but I think particularly at this point, once we've had a half term, we've come back after a couple of weeks break, that reminder is in place both from yourselves as parents and carers at home, and that what we say in school is then reinforced, because it raises that whole expectation for all students, and ensures that we have that standard across the school. So the link to what the uniform should be is within this slide, and obviously, as I said, it will be shared with you. I know that there have been various issues with the uniform in terms of the delivery, and I totally understand that has been quite frustrating, but hopefully all of those are now worked through. If that's not the case, please, as I said, do let the year teams know, but keep supporting us and making sure that uniform is to a standard that is expected and can be maintained throughout the academic year. If there's any support that's required with that, then please do let us know and we can see what we can do to help. But we do really insist that a high standard is the case at all times. I'm now going to pass on to Mrs. Blackwell, who's going to talk to you about teaching and learning and some of the key aspects within that. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss. Hello, everyone. So mine, as Miss Ackerman said, I'm Mrs. Blackwell, and I'm responsible for looking at teaching and learning across the school. So I'm just going to guide you through some of the things we look at and talk about our curriculum and things like that this afternoon, or this evening, I should say. Miss, can you move me on? Thank you very much. So what we aim to do when we're thinking about teaching and learning, when we're planning our lessons here at Carrington, is first of all to have a clear learning journey so the students understand what topic they're learning, why they're learning at that particular point, and they should be able to share that with you at home. And I will get on to later about how you can support your child at home, but obviously asking them what they've done that day, and I'm sure you do this already, but looking at their books, a lot of them will have their books in their bags, etc., etc. They should be able to tell you not just what they're learning, but why they're learning it and what they're going on to learn about. So it's not just a case of, you know, for students, it's to try and put everything into context, really. We also want to make sure that our routines are consistent. So we like to try and meet students at the door, for example, check any things like uniform, but also just welcome them, say hello, check in with them, see how they are at the door, for example. And then I'll come on to what our lessons look like in a moment. One of the things we do want to do is really try and hook them in. As you're probably aware, we have 7 45-minute lessons a day. And therefore, because our lessons, compared to some schools, which might have an hour-long lesson, 50 minutes, or even an hour and a half, some schools have, you know, for 45 minutes, you really, really want to make sure that you're using your time wisely. So we want to get them really curious, really excited, and you know, using the lesson fully straight away. And we also want to try and make them independent and resilient, and that goes right from year 7. I don't have children, but I went to stay with a friend of mine in half term who's got a year 7 child, and I'm sure many of you that are year 7 parents are checking homework, checking timetables, helping them pack their bag, have they got their PE kit, because it is a big transition from primary. But of course, as they go through Key Stage 3 and into Key Stage 4, they will be doing that themselves and becoming, you know, really, really independent young people, and that's what we're aiming for. We're also wanting to show them where they're currently at with target grades and things like that, and also what they need to move on. As you know, we've got, you know, very good colleges locally, Reigate, East Surrey, etc. So they need to know not only Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4, but then later Key Stage 4 to Key Stage 5 as well. And obviously, we're not going to talk about GCSEs this evening, but in Year 9, students get very comprehensive sort of sessions, both in PSHCE and tutor time, and also sort of personal development lessons, sorry, or PSHE for those of you that have heard of that term previously or know of it elsewhere. But also they'll have specific sessions thinking about, well, what do you want to do in the future? Well, what GCSEs would help you with that? So that's really important that they get that sort of information in Year 9 for their options. And also, obviously, we're always trying to make sure the students progress. So looking at the lessons, Miss, if you can change the slide again, please. This is what we try and do in our lessons then. So we always try and have a do it now activity. So this can be a retrieval activity. So maybe something that they learned last week, last year, last month, something that they do straight away. So that could be something that they're handed as they walk in, a quick activity, or it could be something on the board, as I said earlier, just to make sure that the lessons start promptly and are really, really focused. We also discuss with students about the big picture. So we're thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, about the learning journey. So why are you learning at this? How does this link to what we're going on to look at later? If it's a skill, why are we recapping this skill now? What's the skill useful for later? So the big picture is something that's shared. So are we doing this for 3 weeks or 6 weeks or a half a term, or, you know, whatever, how long are we learning something about, you know, about something? That's what the big picture is looking for. Then the get involved section of our lessons would involve a range of activities. So making sure that, again, the lessons are, you know, fairly quick, and so it might be one lesson might be only one activity, but lots of others will have lots and lots of different activities. Making sure that the students aren't just going from one lesson to one lesson, from each lesson to the next one, doing the same activity. And then finally, so I'm flying through these to be quick, but we do try and do reflect and improve. So we often call that DIRT time in lessons. That's a directed improvement and reflection time. So, and again, some of this terminology, depending on which primary school your child has come from, or, you know, they might be aware of these terms already. But what we do is, so when a student has marked a piece of work, it's giving them time to look at what the teacher has said, reflect on that feedback, and then act upon that feedback. And that could be a whole lesson, depending on how big the piece of work was that the teacher marked, or it could be something that is marked, you know, something that they mark themselves. And, you know, what we try and ask is that students write in a black or blue pen. We obviously have pencils for drawing and things like that. We do care about presentation as well, but anything they've marked themselves should be done in green, ideally. So it's really, really clear what the student herself or peer marked. That's what we aim to do. And then finally, on that diagram that you can see in front of you, we've got the Astra challenge. So this is where we would try and have an extension or a challenge activity for students, but it shouldn't just be more. So it shouldn't be, you know, well done, you've done question 1 to 5, I'd like you to now go on to 6 and 7, and for the students just to see it as more of the same. It should be something, maybe a comparison activity or something much bigger. I'm going to talk about homework later, but it mentions about homework. But that's how we plan our lessons. They're all the different elements that we try and include in our lessons. we also have then, so when we're doing feedback, so in terms of the big picture grids, these may look slightly different depending on the subjects. This is one of mine. I'm a history teacher, so this is one of my ones. But what we have here then is we've got basically an overview of what they're going to learn. This is what the students have learned in year 7, for example, in the as part of a What is History foundation sort of introductions activity for about 6 or 7 lessons. And what we do is we have a difficulty rating, and then the students stick this in their book at the beginning of a topic. We then teach the topic, and then at the end of the topic we ask them to go through and tick the success. So the grading there, the plus would be like, I'm absolute expert in this, I'm really confident in this. A tick would be like, yeah, I was there, I was in the lesson, I'm fairly confident, I'm okay, yeah, I've been there. And the minus might be something they didn't understand, or maybe they were absent. And it helps us to think about, for them and for us then, to look at it afterwards as teachers to assess, well, do I need to go back over something? Is there something that all of the class felt they found very tricky and they don't feel confident in? Or is there something, or can we move on? Is that okay? Or is there something, a gap, a skill that I need to go back and fill in, for example? So that's a big picture sheet, which will, as I say, they might not all look exactly the same format as this one, but many will. But this is the idea of a big picture sheet. And then in terms of our feedback and marking, what we try and do is make it meaningful. We don't want just, staff to tick it and write well done and leave it, nothing like that. But it's also got to be manageable in terms of not only for the student, as you can imagine, a student might have 15 spelling mistakes on one A4 piece of paper. Well, we should really only be picking 3 to 5 for them to correct, because otherwise it's just so overwhelming for a student. So it's, it's little and often steps, step by step, improving, but also manageable in terms of staff workload. And then also motivational. So we, as Miss Akavon's mentioned, we always want to do rewards, credits, etc., etc. So that's part of our marking and feedback as well. Many subjects as well, when it's a bit large assessment, will have a success criteria that will be part of the assessment, that will be stuck in and will be highlighted, where they got to, for example, so a student can see where they got to, what they need to do to improve, and that will all be used in the lesson when the teacher is doing their feedback and giving the children time to do their dirt. So that's how we do feedback currently. Thank you, Miss. So moving on then from our individual lessons and thinking about our broad and balanced curriculum. So we have obviously lots of specialist rooms here. So we've and we do obviously the core subjects are maths, English and science. We're going to go into those in more detail in a moment. The humanities subjects, history and RE and geography, are all bespoke lessons. So currently year 7 is French for year 7, for example, but French and Spanish is taught here. For performing arts, students have lessons in music, drama, PE and dance. For technology, as you can see there's a range of the technology, and for textiles, product and food technology, they're on a rota, so they'll do a term of each. And so personal development, I've already mentioned, which is where year 9 would do careers, for example. This is an adapted curriculum that students do with their tutors in sort of tutor time in their first lessons in the morning, twice a week. And then on Wednesday afternoons each week, we have the excellence programmes. The students in year 7 have had currently a rota, which has been organised by myself, and so that will carry on until Christmas. And year 8 and 9 students have had a menu of activities which they picked in July. So they made 4 options in July, and so one option they've done for 6 weeks, and then their second option will start tomorrow. So they've got timetables today for those. Apologies, they're late. There's a long story why, I won't share with you why. The timetables have gone out today, ready for tomorrow. So they'll know if they've picked world sports, for example, they'll need their PE kit for their last lesson tomorrow. And then we will be asking students to pick about the middle of November. All 3 year groups in the key stage, so year 7, 8 and 9 will have a fresh menu of activities to pick in the middle of November, and the deadline for that will be the 1st of December, and they will pick those, and they'll be picked for the January start. So, and again, they'll have 4 options and they'll pick 2 activities, 1 for each half term. And more information on that, because we use a website called Schools Buddy, so more information will come out about that with lots of detailed explanation of how to do it. I'm running assemblies, etc. So hopefully the students will feel really confident in how they select their excellent programme choices as well. But that's what we're doing with that from like I say, middle of November to the 1st of December. And that is something really unique for state schools, to do the excellence programme. So hopefully your child values it and finds it interesting in it. They're getting complete sort of unique experiences, as I say. So that's something. So with the excellence program currently, we've got a menu of both physical activities, creative activities, innovative activities, and trying to make them aspirational really, and think about different hobbies and things like that they may not have had the options to do before. And we'll try and again change many of those options so they get a complete new set menu ready to pick for the spring. Thank you, Miss. So homework, we do have a homework timetable to try and ensure that your child has only a few pieces set each evening. Obviously, we have a 2-week timetable here in school, so it's quite been very, very complicated to work out the homework timetables. But it should be set for mainly at Key Stage 3, it will be set for the fortnight for them to be able to do it, unless it's a smaller piece of work. It could be obviously something that they need to do to bring to a certain lesson. So we call that flip learning. So it's they bring research to the lesson, and then the lesson would start with the do it now, for example. Activity might be, what can you share, you know, all bring up some post-its that they put on the board that share their ideas, and then we'll see, right, what do you already know then about this particular person or event? Okay, let's then take it from there and move on. Homework should always be on Go for Schools. It is something that I do try and check every Friday to see that all pieces of homework on. Obviously, it's really, really difficult in terms of if a staff member is off sick or something like that to set homework, but we do try as much as possible to fill in any gaps. But that's the plan anyway. And as you can see there, we also have a homework club, and there is support in the library. So Antares, as we call it, our library before school in break time. So if students have problems with printing and things like that, that's where they can go. And obviously they can ask their tutors for support and things like that as well. Again, this is a really, really important aspect of student life is homework, because later as they move through the school, it's going to be more about revision and managing their time and that kind of thing, and becoming, as I said earlier, independent, but also resilient as well. So homework's really, really important. If you find there are issues with homework, please do let the tutors know, and then they can let me know, or you can email me directly and I can investigate for you if you feel that there's been an issue with homework or anything like that. I saw someone said something in the chat then, but obviously we'll come back to the chat later. Thank you, Miss. So for you at home then, thinking about, you know, homework, becoming independent, becoming resilient, actually thinking about the suitable space to work. Can fully appreciate students might have to share bedrooms, for example. You might have lots of children in your household. So actually it's thinking about, you know, is there somewhere that's suitable for them, a desk or somewhere, some peace and quiet, so they can really concentrate and focus. Really, what would be useful is often to look at their homework if you can, because what a child's perception is of I've done it could be 3 lines. You might look at it and go, well, have you fully done that? Have you fully, you know, challenged yourself there? Have you done the ad astra? Because there should be ad astras on homeworks as well, potentially, maybe not every time, but sometimes. You know, so again, it might be interesting for you to look at their homework and check that they've completed it. And then have they got access to things like their school email address? Because for the excellence programme, they get emailed of how to fill in their options, and of course, and they'll miss messages, and they'll miss, you know, they could email their teachers directly and say, I missed a lesson, can you send me the work, miss, please? Or I've lost the homework sheet, can you attach one on an email, please, miss, etc. And yes, Go for Schools is ultimately where homework and things will be, but if they haven't got any access to the school email because for whatever reason maybe they missed the lesson in computing or there's an issue like that, then you know, they're really lacking any form of communication that they can have outside school. So it'd be really crucial that you can do that. In terms of revision, guys, I'll come on to that. We've got a school shop, but that's, you know, if there's a particular subject they're struggling with, maybe there's revision guides they could get, and really just show an interest. Can you quiz them, ask some questions? It might be something you've learned about at school yourself, you know, that you can ask them as well. But also we do have on the opposite end of the scale, so of course we have some students who we all know that, I mean, some of your children might need to be dragged here, others are loving school, love homework, but also maybe spend too long on homework. Maybe their homework, they feel that, you know, they spent an hour and a half on a piece of homework and they're worried it's still not good enough. You know, you maybe should be looking at go, actually an hour and a half's fine. It's absolutely okay for you to write on a piece of work, or again to email the teacher, or to write in planners and things like that, that your child spent X amount of time on this and then they have stopped, and even if it's not finished, because some students will be the polar opposite and actually do need to be encouraged to have downtime. And I know it can be seen, you know, very overwhelming, and that's again part of life, isn't it, and managing when your child does their homework. Do they try and do they do it all on a weekend, or they do it each night, or managing their time is part of growing up as well. And so if you can support with that, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Miss. Okay, Miss Akavan, I believe you're going to talk about the teaching groups.
Apologies.
No, that's okay. We're both trying to do, because there's still people joining, so that's fine, Miss. Thank you.
Fine. So we have a bit of a mixed number of teaching groups. In Year 7, we have 8 tutor groups due to the high numbers of students that we admitted this year. So that's why there are also 8 teaching groups for Year 7, and we have obviously changed their timetables since Monday, following the KS data and some Key Stage 2 information, but also some teacher input. In Year 8, we've got 7 teaching groups that correspond with the 7 tutor groups, and then in Year 9, while we have 7 tutor groups, we've actually only got 6 teaching groups. But the way that they are worked is that we have top set groups, often called MNO, or in Year 7 that will include P. And then we have mixed ability teaching, and we made a very conscious decision a couple of years ago not to have what some schools might call a bottom set or a third set or a low set. We do target then our lessons so we can teach to the top within those groups, but we also make sure that we are supporting students within them as well. Students can and they do move between groups. We don't do that sort of randomly. We use the CAD data, which is key assessment data, which we input as staff 3 times a year, and then reports are sent to yourselves. So following those reports, discussions are had within year teams and within heads of faculty and director of learning teams to ensure that students are placed appropriately. So a very long conversation, an ongoing conversation was had about Year 7 to make sure that we made the right decisions for the change of timetables in readiness for this half term. And then again, it's about making sure that that appropriate support and that appropriate challenge is in place for our students. And we recognise that there's a real range of students within a class, within a year group, across the school, and that might be that student has a special educational need, or it might not be, and actually there's something that needs to be identified. And so within those groups, staff have systems in which they can liaise with the SENCO, liaise with year teams, flag any kind of concerns if there are some regarding learning, and make sure that that support is put in place as quickly as possible and is reviewed, so we can make sure that we are continuing to do that good work. Obviously that will involve yourselves as parents and carers, and it will involve the students, so we get their view about how things are going for them as well. So I've talked a little bit about this, but the changes obviously have just happened, and it includes, as I said, the CATs and the Key Stage 2 data, plus a little bit of teacher input. There is a CAD that's due for Year 7, which will come later this half term, and then there will also be a parents' evening coming up shortly after that. All of the information regarding events that take place, I should remind you, are on our website. We have a calendar there that links to our school calendar, so if you're not sure about any of those dates, please do double check the website and you'll be able to find some information there. In Year 8, we have no wider plan changes for any Year 8s at this time. We have made some slight adjustments where they've been needed. We do CAT 4, which is the CATS test catch up, because there were some students that didn't do that last half term or in Year 7, and that includes any new admissions that come through. And then we also have a very specific group within Year 8 that's led by Mrs. Williams, who is actually the head of Year 7, but part of our extended leadership team, which is called the Year 8 Phoenix Project. So it's not a teaching group, but it is a group for a very targeted group of students to focus on teaching, but specifically their learning and their outcomes in terms of learning. And it's a very unique aspect of the Year 8 cohort this year, and it's something that we hope to develop a little bit more widely. So if your child is part of the Phoenix Project, they will hopefully be proudly walking around with a lovely Phoenix badge on their lapels. But it's certainly something that we're hoping that we can expand upon and improve. Currently it's for 15 students, but certainly if you would like some more information about it or how it might run again in the future, then please do let myself or Mrs. Williams know. In Year 9, We obviously have regular discussions. This is a key year for Year 9 in terms of GCSE options, and that whole process will start from January. So all of that will be shared with you when the time comes. And we will make sure that those discussions are being had. Again, we've got CAD data, key assessment data that's due from staff, and then obviously to yourselves in the next few weeks. No more plan changes are in place for Year 9, but again, that always does change if we need to make those changes. And then we have a very specific cohort within Year 9 called Stream 9, which has been running since September. It's a very small teaching group, and it's just for core subjects. So I've put some examples up there: English, Maths and Science and RE. It is a GCSE subject for Year 9 this year, so we do have to treat it as such, and make sure it's a 2-year process through to the end of Year 10. But other subjects are also included in that, such as history and geography. Where there is a more creative subject, that student who is in Stream 9 will be taught as part of a wider group of students, a class of between 25 and 30. So Stream 9 was a new introduction for this year. We also have an equivalent in Year 10, Stream 10, and as I've said, so far it's working successfully. Again, students are able to move into Stream 9, but that's a very careful decision that we make, obviously, as staff and with yourselves as parents and carers if we feel it's necessary. And at this time, we haven't felt that's the case, so we haven't been in touch with anyone further regarding it. Mrs. Blackwell, if I could hand back over to you to talk about the 3 core subjects.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Miss. Okay, so in terms of science then, this slide's been written by Mrs. Gray, who's the head of science. As you can see here, I think the biggest challenge really is the large amount of content and vocabulary to learn in science. So actually revising a little often is really, really beneficial. So I've mentioned the school shop already. So on our school website, you'll see if you go to quick links, there is a school shop emblem, which is like a shopping trolley picture. And on there, there's lots and lots of science Key Stage 3 revision guides, for example, and also Key Stage 4 for any of you that have students in Key Stage 4. So Mrs. asked, please, that if you, once your child has completed their science homework, if you can encourage them to read through it, the work for the week, and also maybe by thinking, right, I've got to remember this information, because science, like lots of our subjects, are building up Key Stage 3 content that they'll need to remember potentially for Key Stage 4 as well. So making revision cards, looking at things like BBC Bite Size. The website has lots and lots of information again for Key Stage 3 science, and potentially using the revision guides if you've got them from the school shop. Also, there's lots of video clips. For example, YouTube has lots of things on cells, etc. as well. So it's using these things to help them and to remember the vocabulary and content that they can build upon it. Okay, so that's really crucial for science, but also I was thinking as well, something else that I should probably mention right now is thinking about our remote learning. If you find for some reason that your child has been absent, for example, or they're unwell, they can't, they feel that they've missed something and they want to go back, there is on our website a section on remote learning, which will have links to maybe something like Oak National Academy, which you might have heard about during the pandemic, which is whereby the government's put together lots and lots of lessons. Or it might be links to, again, activities the child has missed in lessons. So that's another way that you can see an overview, or again, if you feel your child's got a gap, or as I mentioned, if they're absent, that's where you can see some work for them to do. Say that they're too ill to come into school, maybe they're infectious, for example, but they're actually not, they're feeling up to doing a couple of lessons, you could look on remote learning there as well. So that's something else I'll just mention. Thank you, Miss. If I just talk about maths next. Oh, sorry, science, computer. Just before I move on to talk about maths, for homework help, as you know, the science teachers. So this top corridor of the Astra building, our new building, is all science. There's always science teachers around, but also there is Mr. Shah, who is our Key Stage 3 coordinator, and he does every Wednesday after school in 221, as it mentioned. So that'll be after the excellence programme lessons. There are laptops available in science, so if there's something science specific, a homework or an activity and lesson that your child wants some help with, that's who to contact, Mr. Shah, or obviously their individual science teacher. Thank you, Miss. So in maths, we follow the White Rose curriculum. Again, that's something that some of you may be aware of or not, but they study a wide range of topics. What they're trying to do in maths is actually encourage the students to, again, be independent and resilient by solving problems, and also thinking about trying to engage in, maths outside of the classroom as well. Many will find it a challenge from potentially, hopefully anyway, from primary, and it's taught slightly differently potentially. And what we're trying to do is really encourage all the students to reach their fuller potential. Maths is one of those subjects, isn't it, that is not always the most popular, but actually here it can be a very popular subject. And in terms of if you're finding your child is finding the subject tricky, again, go to the school shop, because we do have revision guides on there, I believe, for maths. If not, I'll obviously check that in a minute. I'm sure we do for maths and science, so, and English. And if not, if you contact the teachers or Mr. Ives, who's the head of maths, I'm sure we can get that rectified pretty quickly. Thank you, Miss. Okay, I'm going to hand over now to Mrs. Shaw, who's going to talk about Key Stage 3 English, I believe. Thank you, Miss.
Hi there. Yes, so Key Stage 3 English. So we want to, we've designed our curriculum to build on what students have already done at Key Stage 2. And we want to develop literacy skills, so love of reading, and that then feeds into their writing and also their speaking and listening. These things go hand in hand. And the curriculum in English is built around that, so that students have specific time in the library, particularly in Year 7. They have fortnightly library lessons. There's also a range of topics writers studied, so in terms of fiction and non-fiction that we do, poetry, plays, there's some examples there on the slide of some of the novels that are studied. Year 7s at the moment are just starting a unit on detective fiction and really enjoying that so far. And the idea is that they're building on not just the comprehension skills, but also the inference skills that they might not have done so much of, and getting them to think of it as a detective as they read the novel. And then that's consolidated Year 8 as well. There's a bit more of an emphasis on speaking and listening in Year 8, with some topics on debate, and then that leads on to unseen poetry and dystopian fiction as well later on in the year, as we want to expose them to a wide range of text. And that again is built on in Year 9, when they develop those skills that are going to equip them as they're moving towards their GCSEs. So reading at Carrington, so we've got reading time in lessons for those Year 7s, and specific reading homeworks as well, which should be seen not just in English but thinking cross-curricular, and that then should expose the students to that wide range of fiction and non-fiction that is subject specific as well. So they're coming into contact with this vocabulary, like we mentioned in science as well. There's so much content and vocabulary that is specific to that subject, and we also encourage our students to have a reading book with them. They all have access to our school library, where they can visit before school, break, lunch or after school, and they can go and pick up a library book from there. And so that's something we encourage them to do, so they have that to hand. And we've been having more conversations with students as well about what staff are reading, and also encouraging them to share about their books. And that's one of the nicest things, hearing students talking about the book they're reading, what they like about it, how they would change the ending, and they're the sorts of things that we're doing. And as we focus on reading this year as well, we've got an accelerated reader programme, which will be providing some support. As well as those library lessons, students are provided with a booklet to help them. So this is specifically for Year 7s. And this is so that they can reflect on what they're reading. They can set themselves some reading goals as well. And as I mentioned, all students have got regular access to the library. So we've got loads of, as well as classic novels, we've got a wide range of genres and lots of modern texts, which, yeah, is great opportunity for the students. Really lucky to have those here in school. So reading at home as well. So one thing that can be done at home to support students as well is just continuing those conversations that we're already having, and establishing or continuing those routines. We find that many children have already a good routine of reading, maybe sort of 10-20 minutes before bed, and similar to like the science content, that's sort of little and often, and we just want to continue to build on those as well. And those conversations are so important, that students are able to engage with what's actually happened in the book they've read, but then also make predictions about what could happen next, and that could then lead into their writing as well, as we see that students can then take ideas, borrow ideas from the authors. And yeah, we just want to continue those reading routines. There are some activities around reading, and these are on a later slide. You'll see a link to one, but you can find vocabulary games and reading games as well online, which can be helpful. And then the last thing on this slide, I've put sharing challenges and success. I think it can be helpful for sort of parents or groups of parents to say, actually, my child's just read this book or found this author that they really like, and that could be a way for their friends then to read the same thing, and that can really encourage them as well. So this is just a screenshot of our school. On our school website, we've got a link. So if you go onto Carrington School and then under Learning and our library and TARES, we use a program called Access It, and the link is on the school website, and you can see here that it's like a search engine, and you can see which books are in stock, and you can look at different genres as well. I think this is a really, really useful resource. Miss Hymas as well, our librarian, is brilliant at recommending books, and so do keep an eye on your emails as well as the school website for her recommended reads, because they can be a great way into finding authors, or maybe perhaps a series for your child to read. So we've also got a list here of websites and resources that might be useful. There's some book lists there from the National Literacy Trust. World Book Day is not only great just that one day in March, they've actually got so many resources on their website that are designed around supporting families to help children read at home. And as I mentioned, there's vocabulary game. There's one example of them there that's obviously a building block of reading. If children are exposed to that, those words, then that's going to equip them for future in terms of employment and just the way that they can engage with the world around them, as well as obviously qualifications in the future. So I just think these are really important habits for children to continue to build on, and yeah, we are having a focus on promoting reading at the moment at Carrington.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. I am going to finish up shortly, and as I said, we'll have an opportunity to go through some of the questions that you've been posing. I just want to draw your attention to some student surveys which I've devised. I've put it on Go for Schools as a piece of homework for all students at Key Stage 3, and they are specific to each year group because the experiences obviously of each year group are quite different. So please could you just remind your children that they are there, and the expectation to complete them is by a week on Friday. We did this last year and we've chosen to do it again this year because it's a really good way to get a big essentially understanding of what's going on for each of the different students. Once all of that information is received, I share that then with the heads of year who do some analysis on it, so we can pick up where there are issues from a student's perspective. You know, they might not have a login, or there's an issue that they haven't shared with us yet, or there's actually something very good that's been going on that they think has worked well for them, and it's something that we can then choose to develop and continue with in a future year. So student voice is really important to us. We do have a student council, and all students have been part of the process of either being involved in that as someone who's sharing feedback, or they represent their tutor group in the student council in the various year teams. So please do encourage them to complete that student survey. I would really appreciate as much feedback as possible, because the more we get, the more comprehensive understanding of each year group, but equally each individual student we get as well. There is a specific section regarding bullying and banter, which we've added to this year's survey, just to help students understand that difference, so we can then do some more work regarding that particular aspect of school life and social life, particularly over social media, through things like personal development as the year progresses. We also care about your view, and I know that lots of you have put some questions in the chat, which we're going to get to momentarily, so please do keep sharing with us your thoughts, your suggestions. Obviously myself within the Key Stage 3 team, but also as a senior leadership team, we're very keen to understand your perspective as parents, and the more kind of feedback we get from you, the better to help us do that. So thank you in advance. Just in terms of summary for you to be getting involved, obviously Mrs. Blackwell talked about homework and helping with the completion of that homework. I don't expect that you all are going to be experts in every aspect of a student's education. We are not, we have specialist areas. If you're not sure, then please do ask us, because we can help as much as possible, but supporting and emphasising the importance of homework as a long-term learning habit is really, really key. Use Go for Schools. If you haven't yet downloaded the app, please do. Students can also do the same. It's also accessible via just a standard web page. It's what we use for every aspect of it. It's the first thing, for example, that I open when I come into work in the morning. And it's a really useful tool for us as staff. It's an essential tool for us, but it's also very key for yourselves as well. So please do log into that with the email that you've shared with us. So the one that we have on the system for you is the one that would work for your Go for Schools login, and log in if you haven't done before as a first-time user to reset your password. Any questions, obviously speak to your child's tutor, but it would be really, really helpful for you if you do that. It's also just a reminder about SOCS, which is what we call Supporters of Carrington School. It's to support fundraising, but again, it's an opportunity for you to kind of share your views as a parent, think sort of like old school PTA style. And if you can be involved in that, not necessarily as a long-term commitment, but here and there to be involved, that would be really appreciated, especially if you are a newer parent, either from a year 7 or a new admission, then please do make sure that you kind of make yourself known to Mrs. Gray, who's the Director of Learning for Science, but is our kind of staff focus person for SOCS. And then lastly, we haven't talked about sort of external after school enrichment, apologies, we've talked about excellence, but we do have a really comprehensive enrichment programme, and it's an excellent way for your child to get involved and develop a new skill and learn just something new, but also let off a bit of steam at the end of a school day. So there are a whole timetable for every year group, and it is organised by year group on the website. The only day where we don't have such a range is a Thursday, because that's a training day for us, but it's certainly a really important way for students to be involved and meet a wider range of people, wider range of staff, and just develop a different aspect of their education with us. So I'm going to stop sharing the presentation, and then between myself and Mrs. Blackwell, Mrs. Shaw, we'll go through your various questions. There have been a number of quite similar ones, so where we're able to, we will group those together. Obviously, if you haven't yet asked something and you'd like to, please do type it into the chat, or equally just pop your hand up, your virtual hand that is, and we will try and get to you and make sure that we answer the various questions. So I'm just going to go back to the top, bear with me. So the question regarding credits, so can we see what credits, particularly Ad Astras, are given for on Go for Schools? It's not showing any details. We have 3 credits which are under the titles of Aspire, Innovate and Respect, which are our 3 values. And so as teachers, we would look back at the slide, if you recall from the beginning of the presentation, about what does it mean to be a student that is aspirational, what does it mean to be innovative or respectful, and if we see those sorts of behaviours or that practice or that learning within a lesson, we will reward on that basis. Each of those is worth 1 credit, and they can be given throughout a lesson, after a lesson, as many times within a lesson if needed. The Ad Astra is for something more exceptional. So if a student does a particularly good piece of work, or they might go and help other students, or be directed to be a lead learner for within a lesson, they can be given an Ad Astra for that particular aspect as well. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. If it doesn't, please do let me know. In terms of our students with SEND and struggles with uniform, I do recognise, as a school, we do recognise that this is a difficulty for some of our students. We do make accommodations for uniform. What we are not able to do is do that over a very long period of time, because we have a standard of uniform, as I mentioned, and we want to make sure that all of our students are working within that. We do have options for uniform, so students can wear the skirt or the trouser uniform, and that hopefully should tackle some of the difficulties that I know regarding sensory needs for students with SEND. I'm going to direct some of these questions over to yourself, Mrs. Blackwell, Mrs. Shaw, so please bear with me. I'm just going through them as best as possible. There's a question here regarding what happens after year 9. I'm just going to slightly adjust that and say it happens within year 9. So as I mentioned, from January, we will start the process of students choosing their options. If you go onto our school website, you will be able to see the learning paths which are in place. So if I'm able to, I might just share my screen again with you very quickly to direct you to that point on the website. So I'm going to assume that my screen can be seen. If someone could just give me a nod, that would be great.
Yeah, we can see it,
Thank
Miss.
you. Great. So if you go to learning and then you go to options for Key Stage 4, what you have within that section are what we call pathways. Now, this is obviously the brochure for this academic year's cohort of Year 10, and it might slightly adjust for the next year group. But if you click here, what you'll get is a download of the booklet that we share with students and the pathways that we follow. So please don't take this as definitive, because as I said, it does slightly adjust as the years change because of the different options that we offer. But that's a very good start point if you would like to understand what is the case for Year 9 from January, and there'll be more information that's shared with you regarding that as we get closer to that point.
Yes, if I just move on to the next question.
Yeah, please do.
The same part of the school website, so the learning section, should tell you where the topics are, what topics are going to be taught in this any year group for any subject. So where we've got the subject info section or curriculum intent as well, that will have an overview. So that's where you can see about topics. I've already mentioned about homework, the answer to the question about homework on Go for Schools. So if you find that it's not being set, you can either email me directly, so ablackwell@carringtonschool.org, or obviously email the teacher. It should always be being put onto Go for Schools. We've got here about English as an additional for English lessons.
So where we have students who might need additional support in terms of their reading, I know that Mrs. Shaw is working very, very hard on a really comprehensive plan to support reading, which is part of what the discussion has been about this evening. We have Accelerated Reader, which was mentioned, which is a programme that is for a targeted group of students to support their reading. They use a very comprehensive system of identifying where a student's at, the range of books within which they could be reading, and Antares, our library, is set up to accommodate that support, and then it's reviewed as time goes on. And there are various tests which are called STAR tests, which students take part in. Accelerated Reader isn't a long-term intervention, if you like. It's designed to be short-term, 6 to 8 weeks, perhaps across a half term, and students can kind of be put into it, finish and come back out of it. Obviously, if we are raising the expectation of reading across the school, and then through that process of reading more regularly, we can identify where there's need. I know the English teachers often are considered the ones that have to have that focus, but it's a whole school policy to support reading, and particularly those that find reading difficult, and again through the processes that we have in school, refer that to the relevant part of the team so we can pick up that support as well. I'm going to go back to the website again, sorry to keep kind of flitting between, but again on the website is the homework timetable. So there's a section called homework just here under learning. Pretty much everything is under learning, and what you have is when homework is set and then when it is set. So for Key Stage 3, they have a specific homework timetable that they've been given. As it says there, if they don't, please speak to the Year Hub or contact the child's tutor in the first instance, would be my best advice. Revision guides, Mrs. Blackwell, you've talked about being on the school shop.
Yeah, can I just add something about the school shop? So whilst you were talking, Miss, I thought I'll just quickly check the school shop is up and running, and there's a problem with the link. So I have emailed the teachers who run our school website. So don't panic if you're thinking, well, I can go to the website and go to quick links, and you know, I can click on every other link but that one. There's an error which is being looked at this evening or either tomorrow if they don't pick up their email. Thank you.
Nice. In terms of a printable version of the timetable, our timetable is a great feat of engineering, if I'm honest with you, and Go for Schools is a great place to start. I wouldn't suggest printing from there. However, if you contact your child's tutor, they will be able to give you a printable version. They can email you that copy, and it will be exactly the same one as they've been given out as well. So please do get in touch with your child's tutor if that's the case. There's a question regarding Maths Watch. What I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, Mrs. Blackwell, is to email the name of, or the email address for Mr. Ives to that particular parent, so he can make contact directly, because he'll be the best person to sort that particular issue out for you. In terms of the set, obviously I explained what some of the coding means, NOP, etc. I would have to double check. I don't think it says it directly on your child's timetable, but it should say 7P, for example, and then it would say /EN for English. If you can't see that on their timetable, you would have to contact the year team. What I will say, though, is that the group that your child is sitting in obviously has been chosen on the basis of those CAT scores, Key Stage 2 scores, and obviously adjustments if they're a bit older in the year. The group that they're in actually isn't that important necessarily. We are teaching very similar curriculum across all of our year groups, within those year groups, within the teaching groups, and we are making sure that we are delivering high quality lessons to all of our students. If it's something, however, you do still want to know, as I said, please do contact your child's tutor, because they will be the best person to advise you of that. As I said, just to reinforce, we have top groups and we have mixed ability groups. And we don't have bottom groups. I think students have a perception, perhaps, that if they are in a P or Q or R group, perhaps they're in a bottom set, but that is categorically not the case. So your support in reinforcing that would be appreciated. We do that, but obviously they make their own judgments on these things. So please, very clearly, we have top groups and we have mixed ability groups. In terms of the ratios regarding abilities, a question that's been asked, I don't think I quite understand the question, unless perhaps yourself, Mrs. Blackwell, Mrs. Shaw, do.
I think, yeah, so basically it depends on the subject potentially, because and it will change depending on the year group. So for example, MN and O might be students within a target grade grading of 7 to 9, for example, and then you know, you might have, but one year group might have 50 students who are all have the target of 8 and 9, so you can't fit them all into one classroom. So again, you might then change it so it'd only be 8 to 9 a ratio rather than 7 to 9. So it depends on the year group, but that's how it's done. So in terms of MN and O, it's roughly done like that, and then the other groups will be mixed ability from there, again depending on the year group. So you might have a range of 2 to 4 depending, and then target grades of 5 to 6, and then your MN and O group being 7 to 8 to 9, something along those lines. But it's very much dependent on the cohort of children, so it wouldn't be necessarily the same for every subject, because obviously, you know, skills that are needed for maths will be very different from English. So you might notice that your child is in one class for one subject and one class for another one, and that's again based upon their CAT scores, SAT scores, etc. But I think that's what you mean, so hopefully I've answered that. Thank you.
Thank you. I should just mention the CAT exams, cognitive ability tests, do not require any level of revision. So they're purely based on you know, natural intelligence, if you like. We haven't scheduled any new sessions yet. We're obviously 2 days back after the half term, but any child that missed it, if they're in year 7 from before the half term, they will be scheduled at some point for this half term, and anyone who is a new admission or possibly might have missed it as a year 7 last year, again will be scheduled within this half term. We do that within the school day. There's no additional preparation that's required, but if you would like to know when that's happening, then obviously please let us know. There's a question regarding the Phoenix project, and what I would say is if you or your child do not know about it, then they are not part of it. So please don't worry. But as I said, if you would like more information, then Mrs. Williams is your best person to contact for some further information regarding it. In terms of revision cards for science, again, please ask or please encourage your child or children to ask Mr. Shah, who's the Key Stage 3 coordinator. There will be further information within the school shop that Mrs. Blackwell is going to just make sure that the link is working. And also, you know, there are links to things on Amazon. You can purchase revision cards. It would be worth just making sure that that matches up with the curriculum that we're following, using, as we talked about, the subject information on the website. And also students can create their own, and actually that's quite an effective way of doing it. That processing of writing down information will hopefully help them retain it in the longer run.
Yeah, I think if they're active in their revision, that helps, doesn't it? Moving on to the next question about White Rose Math. No, the students don't have their own logins. They don't need them for that. The school shop, you don't need a login for the school shop. I'd like to say I'm just sorry the link's not working this evening, but you don't need a login for that at all. We are going to share this presentation. Miss Ackerman's mentioned that, so that was an easy one. Go for schools and homework. In terms of that, you can check. So your child can tick what they have completed, but really it's for them to remember what they've done, if that makes sense, rather than they don't. I don't know. I'm not saying this very succinctly. Sorry, long day.
There is a if you go on to Go for Schools, there is a section which says I can't remember the exact phrasing, but completed and ongoing homework tasks, I think is what it says, and it's hyperlinked. If you click that, it will take you directly to the list of activities that students are being asked to complete, along with the date that it's set and the date that it's due, and you can track it that way. If you can't find that for some reason, if you send your child over to one of us or someone within their year team, they can help them find that information either via the app or via the website.
Thank you, Miss.
In terms of parent pay, when your child started, you should have been sent information about it. If you haven't received the information, could I just ask that you email me directly, just so I can confirm who your child is, and I will ask our finance team to set that up for you. So I'm just going to pop my email in the chat, so you can contact me directly regarding that one, if that's okay. I think we're almost at the end with questions. Regarding the CAT test results, these do sit on Go for Schools for us as staff. I don't believe that we have opened that up to parents. But again, if you would like to know a bit more information about it, then please can you email me directly. What I will say is it's essentially just a series of numbers, and we input that into a lovely little spreadsheet, and it does a lot of the work for us. So please just let me know if you would like some more information. As I said, my email is just in the chat. I've just added it. Sorry.
So that's all right. For the next one, talking about your Go for Schools password, if your child hasn't got it, again, you need to email their tutor, who will be able to help them find out about, make sure they've logged into Go for Schools and sit with them and help them do that. Someone's asking about the top classes. Again, any child, it doesn't matter, we don't really have top as such because they're all mixed ability, if you like. But in terms of if you're not sure which class your child is in, it is on their timetable. So it will say 9R history, etc. So that's where you can find out if your child is, I presume you're meaning an MN and O or an MN and O class. That's where you would find that information out. So and then our final question is about Ivy, the school dog. That's a lovely way to end. She's absolutely fine. She unfortunately needed a little bit more time at home, I think. I don't know, Miss Akavan, you sometimes babysit the school dog, don't you? So
I do. I took her to Devon, actually.
She is fine. She's alive and well. Miss Akavan,
she is. I think she just got a bit, we obviously have had a lot going on as a school with building works and change of buildings and all those sorts of things. So she's very small, and she, I think, got very overwhelmed by just the amount of people. She was running her, or a calendar was being run for her, but actually she probably needed to be bit more gradually introduced to what's going on in school. So I have looked after her a couple of times. I took her to Devon a few weeks ago, and she had a great old time there. So she is absolutely fine, but just needs a little bit kind of more time to get settled into a busy secondary school, especially one as busy as ours. So she's all good. I'll put some pictures on Instagram about her at some point, so you can all be reassured that she's perfectly safe and well. Thank you so much. There's lots of you that have attended this evening, and I hope that you found it really useful and informative. The website is a really good place to start in terms of contact details for staff, and obviously you have myself and Mrs. Blackwell's emails if you do need anything further. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we've obviously slightly overrun, but thank you very much for sticking with us, and we will put all of this onto the website. Just give us a few days to tidy things up a little bit, and cut out the chat at the beginning, and it will be ready for you to access by Friday. So thank you very much for your time. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.